Semiconductor Australia 2025. It's the second year of hosting this event. And here to tell us a bit more about it is Stephanie Winwood, who is from Semiconductor Australia and Blue Glass. Steph, what a day. Listen, who are you bringing together here?
Thanks. It's such a great day. We are today bringing together some of Australia's brightest deep tech innovators across semiconductors, quantum and photonics, alongside key policymakers, helping drive and shape the policy that can provide the right frameworks for us to take this into industry translation, as well as the international investment community.
It's amazing, isn't it? Your tagline is powering a smarter Australia. What does that mean?
So Australia has great innovation, but we actually don't have very good industry translation right now. So we currently rank 105 out of 145 countries globally in terms of economic complexity. That means we are currently between Botswana and the Côte d'Ivoire, right? We are a third world nation when it comes to technology translation. The world is a technology world now. We need to reverse this trend, and we need to take the lucky country and turn it into the smart country.
And so the first panel today was called Chip Diplomacy. What does that mean?
So there's a lot of talk globally around the chips arms race, right? All technology, defense platforms are all run on chips. Australia's not yet at the battlefield in terms of chip capability, but we are at the table when it comes to diplomacy, right? We are at the table in terms of influence, and we have incredible national assets such as our geopolitical stability, our tectonic stability, our economic stability, and our trust globally. We also have incredible innovation, and we have this unique window right now with the global tech stack flux. With the innovation that we have now, we can help drive the next era. But the window is now, and it's closing. So it's about showcasing to investors how incredible this opportunity is and stimulating the investment and the support to make this happen.
Well, let's take a little listen to some of this panel right now.
Sorry, Hugh, as New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, you've been at the forefront of shaping Australia's science and innovation agenda. To set the scene for this morning's discussion, why has chip diplomacy become such a critical issue for Australia right now, and how do you see it influencing both our economic opportunities and our national security in the years ahead?
Well, I mean, I can pick up from the last talk, right? I mean, you know, semiconductors are such an integrated part of the global economy in every part of every supply chain, right? That if we're not a part of it, we're just not a part of the global economy, right? And I think that's ultimately why we are, you know, interested in it in general. I mean, you know, for us, the pivot point came when Jim Rabu wrote that semiconductor study for the New South Wales government back in 2019, and I think, you know, we learned from that there are actually a number of really great semiconductor companies in Australia, but primarily around things like design, and niche areas. And I think there was an opportunity to really try and make a lot more of that, and particularly to focus on areas where we could make a contribution, like design, compound semiconductors rather than straight silicon, and as we're seeing now, potentially in areas like packaging. I think it's, you know, and those are areas where we can help our, you know, looking at what Simon was saying, where we're actually starting to not build components but products. And where we're supporting, you know, industries not just in defence but in medical technologies, in consumer electronics and things like that. And so if we can really integrate ourselves into that, we can play a valuable role. And I think, again, I have to be honest, picking up what Simon said, we are sitting right next to the people who will fabricate the silicon for us. We don't have to do that ourselves, right? But all the other things that we can do. So I think this conference and the last one last year and, you know, the support that's gone into S3B and things like that are all part of building that a really important ecosystem. So, you know, I consider it absolutely underpinning for almost everything we do.
Thank you. And I might hand across now to Kobe. We're not here to talk about Weebit, but we're actually here to stay on the geopolitical stage this morning. Can we talk about the global race in semiconductors? We all know how the US announced under Professor Biden a more than $50 billion investment in fab plants. The European Union announced a similar investment. China's investing billions. Everyone around us is pouring billions into subsidies and reshoring their efforts in the semiconductor space. By all accounts, Australia's far behind this race. I think we're pouring billions into infrastructure that a lot of people say we don't need. Can you tell us, is it too late, or is there still a window for us to compete meaningfully on the global stage?
I personally believe that it's never too late. Australia has such a great potential in semiconductors that it's really crazy. Every time I think about it, it drives me nuts, because you're in a place where you have clean air, you have good clean water, no earthquakes, you have the rare earth materials which are critical, and nothing is done about it. Now, by the way, it's not that the government has to pour all this money in from its pockets. It's enough to give tax incentives. It's enough to give, I lost it? Oh, there it is. It's enough to create the right environment for it. And it's a mindset of the government that really does that. So, when you look at small countries like Israel or Ireland or others, the government put money in, but most of what it put in was tax incentives and lured the big players to come. So first of all, in the fabrication space, I think you have a great potential if Australia would just, this is interesting, if Australia would just decide that it really wants to promote manufacturing, I'm sure that many big manufacturers would love to come here and set up plants if you just give them the incentive. This is going to be very interesting. Beyond that, I think you have good engineers here, you have good schools. I understand quite a few of the universities here are really leading universities. And setting up a fabless company is really not a big deal. You really just need to create the ecosystem and the understanding of this market. And today, the investors here don't really understand, the institutions don't understand what semiconductors are. It's unbelievable, the biggest industry in the world, the most important industry in the world, and the institutions have no clue what we're talking about. So doing that education to the market is very important, and the market is running.
Thanks, Kobe. I'll turn to Zoe now. So Zoe, the semiconductor race has become a flashpoint in geopolitics, from US-China export controls to Europe and Japan reshoring supply, and there's obviously the conversation around Taiwan. From your vantage point, how can Australia position ourselves to balance national security with economic opportunity?
I love these easy questions. Thank you so much. I think, so I'm coming at this from a perspective of strategy and policy and geopolitics as a think tanker, as opposed to being a technical semiconductor whiz or investor. So it's really exciting to be here and learn more about all the amazing things that are being done in Australia on that front. For me, I think, in the policy world, this question of what capability does Australia have on semiconductors has really been brought to the fore by this conversation around AI and this term AI sovereignty that we're hearing increasingly, whether you like it or not. And I think, so for us at the Tech Policy Design Institute, we're really looking at how do you step back and view that concept more holistically. And when you talk about strategy between balancing economics and security, really it's about viewing the big chessboard when you think about geopolitics. And I think sometimes, as much as we need to be super focused and down in the specifics of each individual element that builds into that full sort of stack of what makes up AI power, if you will, semiconductor capability obviously being a very important part, it's easy to miss, I guess, the way that those things interact with each other and the bigger negotiating and bargaining position that can be built. And so we've been running a project, a sort of national consultation, to ask this question of what is Australia's capabilities across all of those things. I mean, we've heard several of those things mentioned already. We're talking about skills, we'll talk about policy settings as well, infrastructure, and semiconductors being part of that. And so I guess my comment on that is keeping the big strategic picture as the background context to how we work out, as Hugh said, okay, which are the parts that we can meaningfully value add, and not take the view that we need to do all of those things that feed into the sort of AI ecosystem. We don't need to do all of those onshore. Which are the ones where we can do it meaningfully and really take that strategic big picture view, I think is how we make sure that we are investing our time and energy in things that will make a difference. It doesn't have to be all self-reliance from top to bottom. And then how does that feed into a diplomatic and negotiating position that we see play out potentially, what we're talking about, the announcements overnight, that comes from a bigger picture of a strategic chessboard. So the big picture is my comment on that.
Thanks, Zoe. Omer, You're a passionate advocate for the need for nations to build and strengthen sovereign capabilities in a deteriorating geopolitical environment. Can you talk to how the US is shoring up its global chip supply, and what should Australia be prioritising?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me, obviously. And yeah, the US has been in the forefront of this reshoring, redomiciling of critical infrastructure, critical production, critical supply chains ever since COVID, when we found out that we can't even produce face masks. Then after that, the Biden administration with the CHIPS Act, and I think there's a lot of resources and capital obviously poured into this process. I think we don't have any other choice. We just saw JP Morgan announce that they're going to allocate about $1.5 trillion into redomiciling of supply chains, production chains, chips, obviously, and semiconductor is a big part of that. We all know what's going on in Arizona, and they're trying to replicate what's going on in Taiwan, and the semiconductor industry essentially built a similar or duplicate capability in Arizona. Again, I think this is something that we see, it's a bipartisan effort. Unlike almost everything that's going on right now, that's a lot of polarization, and we don't agree on a lot of things. But when it comes to the re-industrialization and bringing all of these capabilities back onshore to the U.S. and allied countries, the government is doing phenomenal job on both, again, excluding the shutdown and all what we see today. But I think Australia is a bit lagging in that sense. I know that from our experience, both, I've been investing in Australian companies. So another company that I'm involved with and a major investor is Amero. We had a difficult time when we wanted to essentially build the facility here in Australia. And it was much easier to do it in the U.S. So if I could say something to any policymakers, is just try to make it a little bit more business friendly and be aggressive. Be aggressive, because you need these capabilities here.
Before I shoot across to Mike, if we can pass the mic down, just to remind everyone, we do have Q&A for a few minutes at the back end of this session. So there's a QR code on page 4 of your program. Please, if you want to ask questions, you need to use the QR code and type them in. Mike, as the founder of an Australian semiconductor startup, you're at the pointy end of building advanced technology here. You're right at the coalface. What are the biggest barriers you face in starting and scaling semiconductor innovation in Australia?
Yeah, sure, and thanks for having us here today. Actually, I think Australia is a great place to build companies. So let's talk about the positives first. So we've got great universities, we've got great people. I've had engineers working for me in semiconductor companies for the last 10 years here in Australia, and the people you find are very broad, they're system thinkers, they do a very good job, and they're pretty loyal. They don't move around as much as we see in other places like the US. The challenge is maybe the local market's not big enough, so you have to be global from day one. So like Simon said in his presentation, you can't build for a local market, you have to think global. And just because the industry is so small here, the talent pool of engineers is pretty small. So we need to either train them or kind of partner to train engineers. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, just bringing people on and training them up.
Well, Ingrid, Cicada Innovations has supported hundreds of deep tech startups. What are you seeing in Australia's tech ecosystem? Where are our strengths and where are our gaps?
Yeah. So we've seen that we're really starting to hit a point where we've got innovations that could really boost our productivity in this country. At Cicada, we've been supporting companies that are doing quantum sensing, quantum computing, looking at packaging as well. And these sorts of companies are looking at solving problems around AI, for example. So how can you actually get the memory and processing for AI? How can you get the energy requirements within the chip for AI? And also looking at some of the scalability problems of quantum computing. And then we've also been looking at sensing and measuring. All of these are huge opportunities for Australia. But what we're seeing is great initiatives like S3B, like Quantum Australia, are actually seeing these companies being established, which is great, and we're seeing more of them. But as we've heard from a few people already today, we're investing really heavily in that early stage. And the challenge with that, if we don't start to invest in scaling these businesses, what we're going to find ourselves in is a situation where we're investing and putting all the effort in de-risking these companies only to see them being realised offshore. And what that means is that not only the economic and community benefits are realised offshore, it also is a diplomatic issue for us, because it means suddenly our strategic leverage is less than it otherwise would have been. So we've got to be thinking really big, to Zoe's point, we've got to be thinking big picture about this whole opportunity for Australia.
Let's stay on the topic of investing. So we'll pass the mic back down, all the way down to Hugh, if we could, please. Hugh, OCSE has invested directly into the semiconductor sector in Australia through the funding of S3B and companies like Scienta, through the New South Wales Physical Sciences Fund. How can government, whether it's state or federal, give confidence to private investment in Australia? And if you could identify, please, one or two national priorities in the semiconductor space for the next 5 years, what would they be?
Let me try and change the question first, which is my nature, okay? I think, number one, we've got to disabuse ourselves of the fact that we're going to be building a silicon foundry in Australia. It's just not happening, right? I've been to Taiwan a couple of times, and boy, they're so far ahead of even the US. Even the US are going to struggle to compete with that kind of thing. They are struggling to compete. But there are lots of things we do well here, right? Blue glass is a good example, where we really have strengths in, say, compound semiconductors. We have an amazing strength also, which I should not have been surprised at the beginning, in communications, that came out of the original radiator experience and so on. People like Broadcom design their communications chips here, this sort of thing. So we have a lot of strength. And the question is, what I want to do is invest in places where we actually have a comparative advantage and where we potentially could go globally. And, for me, that means a couple of things. It means let's invest in design. And let's be clear, the biggest semiconductor companies in the world make nothing, right? They make designs, okay? Apple, NVIDIA, ARM, all of these companies make nothing, okay? So let's start at that, and, training and design and things. So what Atto's doing, I think, is right on the money for that type of thing. And then I think the other thing is, where are the other niches within that we're good at? Comms, yep, check. I think the quantum opportunity is there, and I'll pick on what Simon said. My take on this is it's here and now for quantum sensing, and we should be investing in these. We invest in a lot of quantum sensing companies, and there is a market and people making revenue out of it, and we have a real advantage. So let's double down on that. And let's pick, I'm not trying to pick anything, but when I look at the people who apply for our programs, which are all competitive, and those that are successful, that's what happens. Do you know what I mean? And like everyone's been saying, and doing that at a scale which the market is the globe. It's not Australia. And we do need to build partnerships. So again, we have an MOU with Taiwan, to make sure that our people can put prototype chips through, foundries in Taiwan, which is key to kind of making this happen. Earlier last month, we signed an MOU with Singapore in packaging and quantum and other areas like that. We need to basically lean on those sorts of things to make ourselves relevant. I worry that sometimes, whenever we talk to the Commonwealth government about semiconductors, all they can think about is a silicon foundry, and they just don't do anything. They don't think any further than that. So policy number one is to have a policy. Maybe one of the outcomes of this conference should be a small working group that puts together a semiconductor policy. Do you know what I mean? And actually says this is what we should be doing, and actually just promulgates it and makes it happen. Because frankly, if we wait for the Commonwealth to do it, it is not going to happen. Okay? Sorry, I should probably stop there because I didn't answer the question.
No, that's all right. This is all a discussion. So maybe, Mike, if you can grab the microphone. Startups need to plug into global supply chains early. You're having this experience at the moment with yours. What does it take for a small player from Australia to build credibility and access in the international chip ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the first thing to understand is building chips is really hard. So you kind of need to know what you're getting into. You need to, you can't just be 10% better. So if you're a small company trying to compete on the global scale, you've got other people competing with you, they're probably much bigger. You need to show something really differentiated. So I think the other thing we need to be careful of in Australia as well is not just convincing ourselves that we've got something really good. You know what I mean? We need to be competitive on the global scale. And so I think for small companies and I think for scale-ups and startups, the most important thing is getting that product market fit, the validation from customers, early design wins, things like that.
So Steph, we had a number of companies presenting here today, both unlisted and listed companies. They participated in a really interactive Q&A, very dynamic, after they presented to the audience. The theme was global impact. So how do you put these companies on the global stage?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So these companies are tackling some of the most audacious innovation challenges right here in Australia. And so we brought them together on an interactive panel to answer questions from the audience, both online and in person, so that they can have a chance to share their views on how they can access global supply chains, how they can rewrite how chips are made, and how they can do that here in Australia.
Okay, let's take a listen.
I think it's fair to say, we talk a lot about the Australian semiconductor industry. We've got 3 leaders here who represent that vanguard, and people who are taking the risk and are actually being out there employing people, building companies and walking the walk. It's very, very impressive. Now, to our panel session, page 4 of your guides, you'll see again we've got the QR code. Please do use that. Give us some questions on the Slido, and I will get to those. But by being sat here first, I get to ask the first questions, which is a privilege. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to begin with Frank. Frank, the photonic guy, self-professed. So photonics is the answer. Big claim. Okay. When I look at what you're doing at InnoFocus and building machines, that's a really big job. And actually, from what I know outside of the semiconductor industry, actually one of the challenges here is that scaling process. And this part of today's proceedings is global impact. Can you tell me about your plans and your vision for how you grow that global impact and how you overcome a massive challenge of distance when it comes to actually growing your business internationally?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question. I think it's a big question. And our product looks fancy. It has been used by researchers, by R&D force in different companies. It has been more and more recognized by the industry leaders, big companies. However, it is very messy every day because design and developing the machine and try to use the machine to enable other people and also ourselves to nano-manufacture optical or photonic devices is a very, very difficult task, right? Heavy investment into the R&D. You need to have a very dedicated technology team, product team, engineering team to do the process design, optimization, tuning every day. It looks fancy. It is messy, but we're digging into it. So basically, back to your question in terms of scaling it and commercialization, I think that dedication is the first thing. This is the 8th year of my company, and we've gone through the pandemic. We've gone through a lot of difficulties, but with the more and more accumulated technology and capability embedded in the equipment, we're getting stronger and stronger, and people will recognize, this is not an overnight task. I think this is the key point. Once we have more and more solid capabilities embedded into a machine that can enable the transformation to the intelligent era, whatever AI, it's not only software, it's not only algorithm, you need hardware. And you need hardware rather, not only in the cloud, not a big computer, but miniaturized devices. So the applications are huge. We are trying to keep innovating but stay focused. Once we are very focusing on something, then you will find the market traction. Because the specific market. For example, I didn't imagine that many companies in Germany came to us. I didn't imagine Intel came to us. I didn't go to them. They came to us because we are focusing on some specific thing and be dedicated. After years, this will be our strength.
Yeah, brilliant. And that dedication then gives you the confidence in the product that when it's been applied on the other side of the planet, of course, actually it's doing what it should. And that's a huge part of the game. Great, thank you. Okay, Michael, next one for you. Great presentation, thank you. I recognize that you're single-handedly lowering the barriers to individuals like me eventually owning acreage properties. So far, I can afford the Wi-Fi router. I can't afford the property. So that's all in a very,
Time
very...
to invest in semiconductors, eh?
My question to you, so we represent, and again, talking about global impact, there's a range of accents sat on this couch right now, right? And you talk about the opportunity to actually attract the brightest and the best to come work in your businesses. You also talk about actually bringing people through the educational system in Australia to work in your company. But how do we give people the confidence, young people the confidence, I think about my kid, and give him the confidence to actually investing his time in education to work towards a career in semiconductor tech in Australia? What more could we be doing to fill out that pipeline and build more talent in the system?
I think that's a good question, and I think it's kind of largely up to us here, to Jack, Frank, and me, to build great companies that people can see careers in. And to be honest, like if you study semiconductors today, there's not that many job opportunities, but we hope that in the years and decades to come, to create many more opportunities for people to come and work in. So I think, we just have to go build that industry, right? Like there's absolutely no reason why Australia can't have like at least a couple % of the global semiconductor value. Once we have that, there's tens of thousands of jobs, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs in Australia for semiconductors. And I think we just have to build more companies and make sure those companies can be successful.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I also think highlighting the opportunity, not just here, that's a bet. When you're 16 years old, that is a gamble that you're taking. Actually looking and going, I'm not just entering a local market, I'm entering a global market for skills as well. In your slide showing the many trillions of dollars of growth and how that's been fueled by really intelligent people doing cool stuff. That's the opportunity also that we need to be linking into. Hey, by the way, you might be able to do that also here in Australia. Great opportunity.
And maybe just to add to that, right? I think people, and maybe young people, need to realize how it's one of the most rewarding industries to work in. It's amazing you can design these chips and then they can end up in billions of devices, right? Like it's, you kind of do it once and it ends up, and it has a global impact. Like it's, when you build like, I remember like one of the things I really liked at Broadcom was we built these Wi-Fi chips that came into all of these Apple and Samsung phones, and anyone I knew, all our family and friends, they all had like something in their pocket that we made, and so I think that's one of the nice things of building, chips.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention the fact that like being a crossover engineer and bureaucrat, you get to be the most interesting person at a party. That's a joke, by the way. All right, thank you. Finally, Jack, my question for you. So here's the interesting thing. We've known each other a while now, and what I see is you're running what I'm now thinking of as a micro multinational, right? From Cicada. You're running a micro multinational, 20 people, but actually operational in 3 continents and pulling together customers and suppliers.
33 now. But yes, since we last spoke with clients.
So that brings challenges, right? It's a huge amount of pressure, and just running a local operation is difficult. To have that global impact, what does it take from you? What does it take from the team? And what can other people learn from that?
Well, to build on what Michael just said, when we first started Sienta, I was actually looking up semiconductor companies in Australia, and he was an inspiration to me, and I'm sure Radiata was to him. So I think just to double down on that point, in terms of multinational focus, I think there's something about being an immigrant. I lived in Germany before. I'm originally from Latvia, where you think global from day one. But in our industry, it's, I think, impossible to do otherwise. There's no market for what we do in Australia. Potentially, something will happen really soon, which I'm very excited about. But, I just came back from a month-long travel, going to Taiwan, US, really being at the thick of our industry. And one of the most, I think, exhilarating parts about being in the semiconductor industry is how it's evolving continuously. Last year, I went to Taiwan, and they were talking about glass interposers. Now we've moved on to only glass core interposers, and it's a completely new dynamic. And I think once you get into the semiconductor industry and you realize how fast-paced it is, it's somewhat addictive, but you have to stay at the edge. You have to be at the center of it, which in many cases is Taiwan, and I think it's starting to shift to Arizona. So that means that I have to be there, I have to be talking, presenting at these events, and that's the only way to get such a novel and unique technology out there. And also, it's one of the most risk-averse industries, I think, in the world. So unless you show continuous progress towards that reliable technology that everybody wants to use, you won't, succeed. That's just kind of the axiom, unfortunately, or fortunately. I've learned to enjoy it. I would say at first this hectic travel was somewhat stressful, but I think both Michael and Frank can probably attest to that it's the job.
It's the job, and also, I'm sure it's very, very motivating when you've got that continued momentum and success, that actually every single one of those trips and interactions is an investment that actually is going to pay off really soon, right? And you can see that happening.
And I can tell a bit of an anecdote from just my trip now to San Fran. I got an incredible honor to sit down with Pat Gelsinger, who maybe some of you know as an ex-CEO of Intel, who somewhat was the inventor of so much of what I presented today. And despite being such an accomplished CEO and just now having the time of his life being a partner in a VC firm, Pat was one of the most humble people, to the extent where I actually presented some of our technological insights to him, and he asked me a question as to why do I think that dual damascene, which is the front-end technology, not going to be adopted for interconnect. And I told him honestly that I've just been to Taiwan. I talked to a couple of other OSATs, and all of them are so focused on cost, and are so afraid of, as you've heard today on the panel, of investing in tens of billions of dollars fabs to just switch to a new edge, technology that needs to be optimized for years. So I had the utmost honor of telling something new to this incredible individual that knows so much more than me. And I feel like the only way I could get there is by traveling and really getting into those rooms and telling them a little bit about the vulnerable journey that we're going through.
Fab. Great story. Thank you. All right, we've got some questions from the floor. I'm going to go to, so this one, I'm going to go to you, Frank. So how do you convince investors and yourself, importantly, that a small Australian startup can out-innovate a multi-billion or even trillion-dollar company?
Focus is still a self-funded company so far, and we've been talking to investors in the past 2 years or so, and we are at the very critical moment to do the first round of fundraising in 2 months' time. I think that maybe this is my personal experience, not common, but I started 2 years ago. I decided not to talk to investors because that cost me a lot of time, and I believe we, as a deep technology innovation company for equipment, for enabling manufacturing capabilities, we need to develop our equipment capability to the next level. And I'm not saying I'm closing the door to investors, but I cannot do it at the same time. So we are currently better positioned to enable or collaborate with more people to build the quantum photonic foundry or the early stage of the laser nano manufacturing platform. And that's why we've been recently very proactively and actively working and talking to the investors. So again, confidence, I mean that you have to trust light is the future. And photonics, Australia has never been lagging behind in terms of the research of photonics technology. If you look at all the major universities and research institutions, all the research leaders, we are a leader in the world in terms of photonic research. I'm personally, I'm a nanophotonic PhD, so basically, but we are really, really bad in terms of commercializing this technology. And US, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, and China, they are really investing heavily into the photonic technology commercialization. So if, in terms of confidence, I'm totally confident about what Australia can do. And in terms of scaling it, it doesn't need too many people to do it, like the traditional semiconductor business or design things, but less investment than the traditional semiconductor. So I'm totally confident about the business model, the revenue model, and the market traction. What I'm not quite confident is actually that we are not as fast as the other part of the world. We need to really build that together, and this one, we can really lead the world or be one of the pioneers rather than lagging behind after several years. We have an opportunity window for 5 years from now. If we don't take it, will be regretted. Yeah.
Mind if I just add one thing to that? So you touched on capital and investors. I think raising money for any startup company is really hard. I think in semi-industry, specifically in Australia. I remember when Andy and I started in 2016. Like semiconductors were the opposite of hot, right? Like it was as cold as ice, like, oh well, much colder. I think as close to 0 degree Kelvin you can get. And so everyone basically told us like, we're crazy, you shouldn't do this. Like we had to go to the US, driving up and down Sandhill Road. And every single investor there told us like, well, like the first thing you'd have to do is pack up and move to Silicon Valley. In fact, like in, I think it was like October, November 2016, we went to go pitch to Sam Altman, who was then the CEO of Y Combinator, and it pitched for like getting $100,000 of them. But the condition was you had to flip the company, pack up, and move to the US. And I'm glad actually that that didn't happen, right? Like the day we pitched was the day after Donald Trump got elected for the first time. And back then, Sam Altman did not like Donald Trump, and so he was tweeting while we were pitching. And so he didn't pay any attention. And I'm really grateful that back at end of 2016, we had like StartMate, like Blackbird invested. The first check was $25,000. And then we had Main Sequence come in, but it wasn't until like Ray, founder of Family Devices, really led our Series A that everyone started following. But it is hard, and I think it's great to see more companies come through this, so we can actually create a real industry together.
Back to several years ago, I think that InnoFocus has been lucky because the very beginning, when we developed the nanolab equipment, we sold it to customers, so that feed the company. But otherwise, I know the working capital is very important. We really need to balance how to raise money and to develop products. Again, I'm saying for the semiconductor business, it's very important that we invest into the R&D and do solid works every day and grow the product portfolio, and money will come. Otherwise, it's just a buzzword. Yeah.
Great confidence building remarks there to finish. One last one. We've got time for one last one. Great, thank you. All right. Well, so I'm going to go to Jekka again and say, here we have one. Jekka, is the company planning to manufacture interconnects for customers in its facilities or license out to other players? What's the plan? How are you taking this out?
That's a fantastic question. So the first tools will be delivered by us, and we'll basically transfer our process and license it to our first customer. That is the plan. Long term, we see us as more of a process provider and working really with the partners that take on the majority of the risk and also have the experience of building high volume manufacturing tools. So this is where our work with Applied Materials is really has been instrumental in us understanding the complexity of focusing on what you're good at. And right now, as a startup and a small team, we have to do it all. Long term, though, we see the biggest value that we can bring to this industry in really teaching someone like TSMC, ASE, and Amkor how to use LEM to manufacture interconnects. Having said that, we do look for partnerships in the space, and we do think that CoWoS alternative manufacturing is one of the hottest topics right now in the US, in Europe, and potentially in Australia. So if you're looking to build interconnects here or anywhere else in the world, we have the technology that can enable you to do that faster. We just don't want to build 5 businesses at the same time as we are a small team at this stage.
A micro multinational, you might say. All right, thank you very much.
All right, Steph, the next panel discussion was entitled Leading from the Front. So it was all about tech sovereignty, building Australia's tech arsenal, so to speak. You talked about us being on the battlefield. Why is that so important? I mean, Bell Potter's James Berman led this discussion. So what was the thrust of that?
So if you look at what is going on geopolitically, I think it speaks for itself, the need for nations to be looking at sovereign supply chains. We learned in COVID how quickly you can get cut off from global supply chains, and in many instances took up to 18 months for people to get a part for their car, right? We are living in a globally connected environment, and so these supply chains, there are vulnerabilities. So we need to be looking at how do we invest in making sure that we have continued supply chain access, regardless of what else is going on globally. But also, how do we create influence and support our own innovators here in Australia so that we can also lead in these very big markets?
We'll bring you this panel discussion now.
So we'll get straight into it. We've got a great panel here, so we'll kick it off. So Jens Goneman, Defence Counsel, former executive at Airbus. You lead Australia's Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, and you're, as I said, senior member at Airbus before that. So wide-ranging perspectives, we presume, on sovereign capability and global supply chains. So to open up the discussion, why is tech sovereignty now being talked about in the same breath as strategic deterrence? Nice easy one to start for you.
Yeah, thank you. Tech sovereigns. I mean, Australia, in regards to technology to deter, is not able to do that by itself. We are a country of 27 million, and we have the size of the US minus Alaska, but the population of Texas. So we need to be realistic, first of all, when we ask the question, what does that sovereign capability mean? And in my view, it very much depends on the partners we're dealing with. So the sovereign risk is a question more for our capable allies who work with us and trusting us with their technology and how we protect it, rather than how our technology is being protected in their value chains.
And how do we do that?
The emphasis of small countries, and we are a country which, in the way of making things, we rank on number 105 in the world. We are a lucky country who dig up stuff and sell each other houses, but when it comes to adding value onshore and exporting, that we are number 105. And I want to let this sink in, because it is so utterly disgusting that when we are not getting the curve from going from lucky to smart, my 4 kids and everybody else's will not have any meaningful jobs which come anywhere clear and near to the lifestyle we have. So for us, the question is to be honest to ourselves what we are able to do and how we turn this into a meaningful contribution to global value chains. When it comes to defending our country and making meaningful contributions, it's the question, how are we invited to the table of the big end of town? These are our allies, foremost the US. And let's get into their value chains and make sure that their sovereign interests are protected, not the other way around. Entrusting us with nuclear technology, we need to lift our game in order for being worthwhile to be a recipient and hopefully make a meaningful contribution in small but meaningful and competitive parts rather than frying the ocean.
Thank you, Jens. We'll park those thoughts for a moment and we'll bring some others into the discussion. So we'll move on to Matt from Hypersonics. So you're now at the centre of global strategic deterrence, and this is related to the discussion we just had with Jens. Where are Australia's unique advantages in the race you are competing in?
Well, there's where our advantages are right now and where we can quite quickly create them. And it's a bit of what Jens was discussing, but also a little bit more in the weeds, I suppose, or in the detail. 3D printing has changed the game. There's no doubt about it. You can get 3D printers manufactured locally. You can buy them internationally. From our product perspective, we use 3D printers. So that's leveled the playing field in terms of manufacturing costs in a large sense. The cost of an engineer in Australia is not that different to one in Europe or the US, but then the cost of a technician is also not that different. But the advantages of using 3D printing is that you need less technicians, so therefore you've got much more parity in terms of production costs. With the use of 3D printers in the sense of our industry, and we see this across other industries that are defence and deep tech and dual-use companies, the 3D printing equation has really been the intersecting technology that's moved us along to being competitive. But there's also other technologies that are coming through. We've got companies like Advanced Navigation who are building avionics in Australia, and that's also creating a sovereign capability. But from our perspective, in terms of how it's shifting the dial from a sovereign capability perspective, having 3D printing capability in this country, and like I said, we manufacture our vehicles in Australia, we can basically shut off our borders and we'd be able to continue to do that. And I think that's, for me, that's what sovereign capability is all about. If push came to shove, could we make stuff here if we were disconnected? And with 3D printing, we could.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We'll move on to Drone Shield, and with Angus Bean here, the CTOs, COO as well?
CPO now.
Congratulations.
Yesterday.
What's that mean?
Chief Product Officer.
Got it.
So strategy and events like this.
Congratulations. Drone Shield exports all over the globe now. So how and why was Drone Shield able to achieve that out of Australia? What lessons can other companies draw from Drone Shield's success in taking their tech global?
Thanks, James. Good to see you.
And you.
Look, great panel we've got here. So, yeah, the Drone Shield story is a really interesting one, and for those of you who haven't heard too much about it, it has been a sort of a 10-year absolute slog to get to the level of success we've seen in the last particularly 12 months. During that slog, I think the key for us was focus, right? And I think I will also agree with Jens' comments around, we can't do everything ourselves, and we also should not try to compete in markets that have really large dominant players. So Drone Shield, we had this theory that drone technology would emerge and at a certain point become a threat to national security and defence, and we've stuck to that for 10 years, right? And we were told by every credible defence and security source, it was laughed out of meeting rooms for the better part of a decade. and then obviously we've seen the events of Ukraine unfold. So I think it's a matter of having that thesis, proving it out, having the focus to just stick at it, and then focusing on an area that is either niche or cutting edge, where you can have a competitive advantage over the much larger and significantly entrenched competitors.
Thanks, Angus. And it's a good segue to speak with Sunny. Vision and AI systems in the counter-drone space at a different stage of the journey to Drone Shield. And how did you find yourself in that niche? Why are you going after that sector? And how can you achieve success globally from Australia?
Well, firstly, good afternoon, everyone. And secondly, James, you're not sticking to script, mate. That is not on one of my questions. So
it was close.
You've got
it was
me
close.
Really
I don't want to...
Well, in response to that, someone once said to me, when you get on a panel, you've got to drive your own narrative. So one thing I did want to sort of say before I answer those questions that I'm not very prepared for is, the definition of sovereign I always find somewhat interesting, and I suspect, like everyone in this room, there's probably a couple of hundred people and probably 400 opinions on what sovereign really is. And, it's everything from, hey, the IP's got to be in country, you've got to employ Australians, you've got to manufacture in Australia, all those sort of things. And none of them are wrong, in my opinion. I think they're all right. But I think really sovereign has lots of definitions, and it depends on the life cycle of a company. And let me give you an example. Every example I use always is about cars. Everything goes back to cars in my view. Not I'm a car fan, and I'll tell you, in 2021, into 2021, I was buying a new car, and I want to go electric. And I think this is a safe place to say I'm an electric car driver. And so I went out and bought the car. And to me, the sovereign need at that point in time was I needed to speak to a salesman or salesperson in Australia, and I needed to be able to buy the car in Australia. So that was my kind of sovereign requirement, and I'm not going to tell you who the car manufacturer is because it became a long and sordid story. Then I had the car for 6 months, or actually no, 6 weeks, sorry, and there was a little scratch on the windscreen, so I needed to go get it fixed. So I went back to the car manufacturer or the dealer and said, there's this problem. So my sovereign need swapped from needing to speak to someone who could supply and sell me the car to someone who could fix the car. And they did. And they said, no problem, we can fix that. It'll take 6 weeks for a windscreen, right? So that was the first step in a journey of, wow, is this really a sovereign company? Got over that fiasco, and then, bearing in mind this is a brand new car, 8 months later I had a crash. First crash I'd had in 35 years, my fault. Little dingle, no one hurt, thankfully, but car significantly damaged. So what do you think my sovereign need was at that stage? Who can fix it and where do the parts come from? And that was the next step in the journey of a long journey. Long story short, about 18 months to get that car repaired. Actually didn't get repaired in the end, it got written off. But the point was, my sovereign need, or the need of the company and who I was engaging with, changed at every step of the way. So my advice is sovereign is not I have an employee or I can fix or I have I can get the parts or whatever. It kind of evolves depending on the life cycle need of your customer. And that's the other thing I was going to say, actually. I should have said that at the get-go. Everyone defines sovereign as I have people in Australia, I own the AP and everything. Sovereign is not defined by you and the shingle you hang on the door. Sovereign, the definition of it, is defined by your customer and what they need of you. And I think a lot of companies kind of miss that point. Now, going back to your question, which I completely forgot, but I think I distracted everyone enough.
Drive your own narrative, that's quite okay.
No, what was the question though? Sorry.
Just your journey into what niche did you identify in the counter-drone space, and why and how go after it from little old Australia with our 27 million people and 105th rank in manufacturing?
Well, we kind of, Drone Shield is a success story from our perspective because we're kind of in the same game. I would say we're more frenemies, we don't compete, we're kind of complementary, but if you talk about sovereign, we had a bunch of really smart people who spent 5 years building some awesome technology in Australia, software. And then I was brought in, so unfortunately I'm not a founder, inherited the company, and I came in a couple of years ago with the view to commercialise that technology and look for really great fits for the technology. In our case, we started in autonomous vision for vehicles, vision for autonomous vehicles, and now we're solving the drone problem for the Australian Army, for the US Army and a few other customers I can't talk about. So it's been quite an amazing journey. From my perspective, very proud of what we've achieved. I think we call ourselves a sovereign company by virtue of the capability we have and the people we have, but more importantly, our alignment with our customer and addressing their needs.
Thanks, Sonny. And we might move on to Paula. So to talk about, we talked about customers there, let's talk about ownership. So you're leading at the intersection of industry and government with RAISE, and you've seen firsthand how critical technologies move from concept to sovereign capability. So where is Australia most at risk of losing control of valuable IP, and what can we do about that?
I think it's a little bit of education. I think a lot of our startups, our tech companies, actually get a little bit starry-eyed around going into defence and working with defence and getting their technology out there. I think the key is protecting their intellectual property before they even start those conversations. And I think that IP strategy, first up, about who is your client, where are you going to manufacture, and making sure that you have that protection in place before you even start entering into those discussions with those national security organisations and defence. So I think the protection of our intellectual property is really key to maintaining that. And not as exciting as Sonny. I tried to buy a car through COVID and it took me 18 months for it to arrive, so there were no cars.
So you do see startups and smaller companies, they're particularly vulnerable when dealing with those large counterparties, the primes and defence forces of the world, and what are the tricks and traps to avoid?
I think initially when they start with their technology, they want to go out and show someone. They want to go and talk to people about it. Now, the minute you go out and you show off your technology, then the ability to protect it through a patent environment is lost. So it's having the, the know-how to start that conversation very early with your IP strategy about how to protect it. And also being strong enough to be able to push back on those industries to protect your background IP. What they will often say is it's a national security issue, and they will want to take that IP. Certainly what they do with your IP in the semiconductor industry, it's a part, it's a component. So what defence does with that component might be national security, but that component itself is your intellectual property. So being strong enough to be able to push back on that and have that conversation to maintain your own your background intellectual property, your patents, your trademarks, your brand, and also understanding that if you're going to start working internationally with international governments and military, that you're very aware of what they're going to do, because we have lots of examples in the US where it just gets taken. It's very difficult to control it if you don't own it.
That's fascinating, and obviously can be company defining or destroying what happens early on with the IP.
Yeah, it's long-term commercialisation. So, and that's where we struggle in Australia, is that commercialisation, but getting investors and going to that next level in your business strategy is all about making sure that you've got your IP protected.
Thanks, Paula. Jens, we might move back to you. This is probably a continuation from the discussion earlier, but as Australia, and this is not just across defence and tech, it's across healthcare and other sectors as well, where we've got world-class research and institutions, and then we struggle with the translation, the commercialisation. So from your perspective, how can we improve this? How can we create the conditions to be better at that commercialisation step?
Is Australia world-class in research, or are we telling us that we are good in research? Let me unpack that a little bit. We have a lot of universities. We have a very strong university sector, which makes it very attractive for parents from other countries to send their kids and pay us a mozza for that. It is being argued that the ranking of Australia's university is based on rather shallow but quantitatively large amount of research. And so I challenge that we have world-class research. We have one significant 100-year-old research institute which the Australian industry finds it increasingly difficult to work with. And if you are looking at the industry structure in Australia, 47,000 manufacturers, 90% employ less than 20 people, fewer than 20 people. So for them to work with an organization like yours and to pay the viable bills you're charging them, to work with CSIRO or with other universities is a challenge, number one. Number two, when it comes to innovation, innovation for me is invention translated into outcomes. Not a good idea, but the realization of the idea. And in that regard, we are not good innovators, we are good inventors. And from the $12 billion we have on government R&D, we're blowing out 60% of these $12 billion taxpayers' money on government R&D. We blow this out in technology readiness level number 2. We have 9 levels. Level 1, somebody should fly to the moon. Level 9, Apollo 11 coming back successfully. Now, which of these levels is more expensive, number 1 or number 9? Of course, it's number 9. If we blow out 60% of that, and that is also my accusation to the university sector and their world-class research, if we blow that money out that early and don't translate it into a real-life outcome, one must not wonder that we are not good innovators, we are good inventors and stop short. So that is our problem. And if we then ask ourselves how we want to change that, it's simply a question of focus. We can't do everything a little bit. We need to focus on areas of strength. We have started doing that. Health is a good example. Commodities, renewables are other good example. Agri is a good example. We feed 80 million people and eat for 27. So we're focusing. Number 2 is we need to get better in distributing the funds available to help companies to commercialize. And this is where we are completely blank. We're completely blank. We have other countries with research organizations like Fraunhofer, UK Catapult, which are about applied research. We have barely anything like that in Australia, and we do not have the funds. The funds are utterly wrongly distributed.
Anybody want to comment on that, on the panel? Big can of worms. If a politician was here, they'd say, what about the R&D rebate and all of that? We do help industry, we do X, Y, and Z.
The R&D rebate is very much liked by industry because it's an untargeted instrument and is in contradiction to focusing on areas of strength, because you just need to say, I have a good idea, give me my tax back, and that doesn't serve a country which needs to focus. So that's the first problem with the R&D rebate, even though it's very, very popular. What we need is, along the technology readiness levels, we need to spend more money. If we keep the pot consistent, we need to distribute the pot differently, and we need to shift money into the applied research areas to commercialize, because this is, at the very end, is only one source where the money is coming from. It's not being printed, it's not coming from HR, it is coming from a paying customer. So if you don't translate any idea into a product which a customer pays money for, and we can raise taxes on this money, we will not get any money. So we need to distribute it in order that the outcome at the end for society and for our country as such is more impactful.
Thank you for watching Semiconductor Australia 2025. You can watch all of these panel discussions again by clicking on the series link on the website, Semiconductor Australia 2025. Steph, so the final panel of the day, what was that?
So the final panel today is where quantum and AI collide. So it is looking at where Australia's role is in 2 of the biggest technologies in the global tech stack today.
So let's take a listen.
Quantum computing can be a little bit abstract. Could you give us a concrete example of a problem that a quantum computer could solve better than today's systems, and then contrast that with what AI is already enabling in practice?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, and hey everyone, and amazing panelists here with me. I hope everyone's got a drink and sat down and enjoying. So when I think about that, I think about it from a couple of angles. The first piece is around how do we complement AI? It's a really hot topic at the moment in the world. It's probably the most bubbly, frothy time it's been in Silicon Valley in terms of cash coming in, and as you would know, Jonathan. And so anything attached to AI gets a lot of funding. The way that quantum is now impacting that is we're applying quantum technologies to solve for different types of data sets and training methodology that you can't currently do with the classical machine learning models. I touched on it before in the presentation around what we're doing with quantum enhanced machine learning. And what we can do is we can take the lower dimensional data sets and we can enrich it by running it through what we call a quantum reservoir. And so this is basically an extrapolation where it runs, sorry if this gets technical, but nonlinear transforms on traditional data sets, and then it expands it, makes it more rich, and lifts it to a higher dimensionality. So we can take it up to 70 different dimensions. What that allows you to do is then have a richer feature set to then create more features to get a better prediction on your machine learning. Why that is then also important is not just the improvement in performance on a particular type of data set, but it's also about the training time to get that machine up to speed on being able to do prediction. And so one of the big benefits of a hybrid quantum and high performance compute solution is that you can use the quantum system to generate the features that are richer and able to draw a better prediction, but you're also able to do it faster, and you're able to produce those features for predicting what's going to happen on a network or in a model much faster than you can when you traditionally have to train a classical machine learning system. It's an iterative process, whereas the quantum process is very quick. So you save on the compute time and the energy resources as well. So it's really just about getting the quantum computers, the QPUs, doing what they do best, the GPUs doing what they do best, and the CPUs doing what they do best in a hybrid scenario. And how that then unfolds is that you end up with a data center that has multiple different types of quantum processor, GPUs and CPUs, and you get them all doing what they're very best at. And so the impact there is that you get this benefit from quantum computing that doesn't replace AI, but it enhances it, makes it faster, lowers the cost of energy and other resources.
Yeah, okay, great. That's a great explanation, really clear. Thank you. I'd like to switch to Mark now. So Mark, Quantum Brilliance is pioneering room temperature quantum computing using diamond technology. So it's a very different approach to the cryogenic models that are dominating globally. What unique opportunities does this create for Australia in carving out a defensible niche in quantum? Pass the microphone down, thank you.
For Australia, Australia has a very strong diamond quantum industry, and that's due to the significant investment that Australian research and government has actually made within the community. And just within Australia, we see about 7 spin-outs that focuses on using synthetic diamond for either quantum sensing or quantum computing. But I think the other very unique feature that Australia has is it actually has a really strong supporting capability infrastructure. It also has very strong quantum engineers that is actually able to accelerate some of the componentry development and capabilities so that these companies can work with Australian industries to get to market faster. And one example of that is actually Emergence Quantum, sitting right next to me. They are a company that is probably one of the leading companies in working with quantum computing, quantum sensing companies to develop new FPGA chips as well as new ASIC chips in order to bring stuff closer to market. And Australia has one of the highest concentration in terms of FPGA and quantum engineers per capita. And if we can work together as an ecosystem, I think Australia can really dominate and become a country that has higher economic complexity, higher than 100, rank 106, as Kathy pointed out. So this is a very unique opportunity that Australia should harness.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I might move to Thomas now, if you can just hand the mic over. When we talk about the convergence of quantum and AI, what could that actually mean in practice? So how do quantum capabilities enhance AI, and what kinds of problems could this combination realistically help us solve?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I know the session was called like collision, or you know, I don't think as much as a collision or even a convergence. It's probably more of a coexistence, right? I would imagine. It's something where the types of problems that they solve are quite different and optimized for different things, so that you wouldn't necessarily think that just a fusion of them would be the optimal solution. So figuring out how they balance together, how they work together in a system, like you'd have FPGAs, hard cores for AI processing, and then also something that was based in the GPU, all those things interacting and working on the problems that they're meant for is probably the type of thing to think about how quantum starts to interact with machine learning hardware, right? In that regard, as far as applications, it really is probably better to think about it from the perspective of, yeah, what is your application? Like, where are those opportunities first before you start thinking about even the merger of these things and how they could help you? Like, that's not really maybe the right way to think about it. It's like we think about the applications that could have a huge impact, how you do that from a hardware-software perspective, and then you start to see where the answers are as far as what makes sense there. Something computationally hard may not be the right thing for a quantum system to even start to tackle, even part of that routine, whereas AI will be completely sufficient for that model. And there's other aspects where it's very physically dependent what that system will be able to do for your particular application as well. Those things all drive these things as far as the complexity of the problem, the individual quality of the gates, and how they map onto that application space. So understanding that application, which roots in algorithms, is really the most important part. Then that'll start to, I think, answer the question of where the opportunities lie. But there's a good point where I think this idea that naturally AI and quantum, there's all of a sudden this fusion that suddenly makes something better. It's a bit more, I would say, in my mind, you've got this space where you can think about it as you've got classical hardware and then quantum-based hardware, and then you have classical problems and then quantum problems. This kind of four sector type of way of thinking of things. You can divide it up into problem sets where now you can really understand which ones might be more valuable. Like if you look at the analysis of whether quantum systems are good for quantum problems, that's probably the most unexplored in some sense and likely least relevant in the near term. But for instance, like beyond the obvious of classical hardware and classical problems, classical helping out quantum systems, tuning them up, being able to do things at the complexity levels that humans can't or even normal programming is capable of. Those are probably near-term wins in being able to impact. And that fusion essentially is gained by that. And I think that's sort of the intent of some of the question. The other side that might be interesting as well, if you look in that kind of quadrant picture, is quantum hardware and classical problems. And so I think that's something which actually Brett alluded to. So it could be something where you have a quantum physical system, you take advantage of its huge Hilbert space, the nature of it, whether it's a reservoir or something else, where you're actually doing something that improves training efficiency, improves power, so your energy does it quicker, there's a cost savings, all of those things. So if you can find that, driven by that application and how those quantum technologies then map to those potential quantum or classical problems, I think those are also potentially near-term wins as well. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Might switch gears now. We've talked a bit about maybe the technology and the applications. I want to talk a little bit about the investment side of things. So I'm going to go to you, Jonathan. As an investor, you're focused on frontier technologies with real-world impact. From your perspective, why is the convergence of quantum and AI attracting such a global attention? And what are the signals that investors and policymakers should look for to separate real opportunities from hype?
Yeah. So great to see everyone here and great to be part of this panel. So I'm the CEO of BFA Global Investors. I'm based in Singapore, but we invest globally across growth. We've had a large focus on US, but have also done some things in Australia. From an investor's perspective, it has been relatively simple when they think through cash flows, right? Ultimately, an investor is looking how far ahead are we thinking before there are reasonable cash flows and applications. Where I think, a good place to start is to think about what AI has done differently, I think, to people's mindsets, has started to think about that you don't actually need the perfect product to generate great revenue, great applications. If you think about it, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, you release a really bad iPhone or a really bad computer game, people sort of say, why the hell did you send me this imperfect product? I mean, ChatGPT, kind of all the different applications, all these incredible companies are not perfect by any means, but they are clearly generating revenue quickly. And I think what's important in the mindset of a lot of people, which you guys have touched on, it's very tempting to think we're suddenly in an AI wave and that software and cloud and compute and all these other waves have ended, but they're actually compounding on each other. So you're not at this sort of situation where suddenly, oh my God, I've got this new era and only, I have to rely on these AI cash flows. I think what you're seeing is all these different cycles, which are only in aggregate 20, 15, 10 years old, converging on each other, and then AI and then quantum are kind of playing a new layer on top of them, which we're getting a little stale, right? Like, to be honest, the valuations in software and, how many new dating apps do you need? How many new QR codes to scan to order your food, right? And then we kind of were getting there with high valuations post-COVID. And I think what we've seen now is a reworking of A, don't need the perfect product for the first time. B, these can be seriously impressive and grow and iterate from beta versions through. And then ultimately they have enormous applications, which I think is really key to solve, some of the real existential crises of our time. I spent a lot of time working at Goldman Sachs in China. I speak fluent Chinese. I care a lot about China. I think the story is sort of US and China in our world. And the reality is that for US, Australia, and the Western countries to be competitive, we really need to improve our productivity and do it quickly. We don't exist in a 0% interest rate world like we used to, where there was free money. And these technologies, in many ways are the way out for a lot of the problems, and investors recognize that, and impressively, the applications are coming quicker and faster. I think with quantum, as I've sort of alluded on, and the guys have mentioned really well, obviously the technical experts, quantum is also going to benefit from AI. It's going to benefit from everything from cooling to the photonics to the chips to all the abilities to rack the data centers, et cetera. And I think people are aware that it's coming a lot sooner than others. How do you recognize hype? It's the question I get the most, of course. Are we in a bubble? I mean, it's the kind of common saying. I think it's pretty clear that we're not in a bubble in traditional sense, like maybe the railroads and fibers where, hey, there's a supply glut. I think clearly the demand is there and it's only growing. We're probably being more of a capacity issue, which it seems like, everyone's talking about now. So I think at the end of the day, it's who controls, those ultimate power, who controls the supply chain, how can you kind of believe that those companies will continue to scale? And then, ultimately, it might be tough to hear, but, the winners will probably keep on winning because they're in that position to continue to grow market share and benefit from all those different cycles. So I don't think we're certainly seeing hype. There's, companies setting up with seed rounds that are, 500 million, 2 billion valuations with nothing. I mean, there's a famous one going on now with Peter Thiel and Parmalucky, and there's all sorts of those behaviors. But, fundamentally, the overall spend versus previous bubbles is not significant. I always look at the sort of 6% to GDP number in the railroad as, the railroad era is kind of a good example of when things got really hyped. We're sort of sitting closer to 1 or 2. The build out hasn't really even started yet. And I think, no doubt we will end there, like it always does, but I think it's going to feel and look a lot different to what we've seen previously.
Yeah, okay, that's great insight. I'd like to move to Marcel now. Marcel, Rest Data is working on sovereign cloud and infrastructure that integrates quantum and AI capabilities. From your vantage point, how do Australia stack up? when it compares to our peers around sovereign AI ambitions and capabilities?
Great question. I think Australia stacks up very well when it comes to ambition and capability. The type of people you've got up here on stage with me and the innovators that we have within our country are brilliant, and they have a great skill set, and we've got great knowledge in our country. I think where we are falling down a little bit is investment in laying down the foundation, so providing them the latest infrastructure for them to do their best work. And I think that's something that we need to really look at as a country, and how are we going to keep the knowledge base here in our country and provide them with the right sort of infrastructure so they can do their best work.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. And if you can pass the mic down to Andreas. Andreas, you've built a career at the intersection of cybersecurity, AI, and advanced computing. As quantum and AI converge, what are the biggest security risks Australia needs to anticipate now?
How long do we have in this session?
Not long enough.
The first thing that comes to mind was along my presentation, obviously this breaking of cryptography from quantum computers once they are big enough is a big threat. We know how to break those encryption algorithms. We just don't have the quantum computers to do so yet. So that is really a wake-up call for everybody. But thinking about AI, and AI, what AI is really good at is this AI inference. It's not so much kind of like, ChatGPT, it's really this pattern recognition. And it turns out it is very good for what we call side channel attacks. Sometimes if you want to break something, you don't actually have to break it. Think of it, you want to break a lock. So you don't actually have to break the lock itself. You just have to listen to the clicks of the cylinders so you can open the lock. And that's exactly what side channels attacks are. Sometimes people are just analyzing the power consumption of a CPU to break an encryption algorithm. And AI is exceptionally good at doing this. And to Jonathan's point, AI could be wrong 1,000,000 times. If it's right the 1,000,001st time, I'm done. So AI is actually really, really good in those side channel attacks, and we can expect a lot of vulnerabilities being found in existing systems by AI being let loose on those algorithms as well. And obviously, the next thing, what is very efficient is social engineering, even to this day. Right now, we are being groomed to be talking to chatbots all over the place. Just imagine what those chatbots can do if you kind of like use them for the wrong purposes. Social engineering will be kind of like rampant, in the years to come, especially as security gets increased. We've seen this in the banking space with two-factor authentication. Suddenly I have someone calling you up, asking about the two-factor authentication code. And you can fully automate this with AI now too. So there's security implications wherever you look, especially in the intersection of quantum and AI. And there's more in quantum as well. So quantum itself can be used for security purposes as well.
Yeah, sure, thank you. Just to remind everyone, you can put some questions in. There's a QR code on page 3 here. If you can scan that and put your question in, and if you do that, just please post who it is that you're trying to ask the question to. Okay, so moving on. I want to go back to Thomas. We all know that the number of qubits is a pretty sort of hot topic when it comes to talking about quantum computers. But should investors and policymakers, what should investors and policymakers look at to judge other than qubit count when they're looking at quantum and AI systems and deciding whether they're commercially credible?
Yeah, so I think that the question is framed from a perspective that it's talking about primarily things that are useful for executing algorithms and applications, right? So there's some pretty clear metrics that you would try to follow aside from qubit count for that. So people have tried to find the right ones to hang their hat on, and you can think about sort of complexity as one angle. So you can break that down into a technical jargon, which would be like things like the type of gates, T gates, or really something complex in that area, but it tells you really how hard a problem is based on that application. Then the other thing is how good are those individual qubits, right? And that kind of tells you how many of these like logical qubits or actual computational qubits you have. So Just stating numbers has, for more than a decade, been really kind of more of a PR, but a wrong way of capturing, like, the computational power of a system. So that's going to keep evolving. Everybody's going to find their latest way of capturing the right way to talk about, particularly their system. You know, there's a bit of bias there that people put in. But it's not like there's a single answer for necessarily for investors. I think when you do look at it, those are the types of things you can look at today and say, well, what are you telling us that your physical qubit count will need to be in order to have a single logical qubit? Then what types of problems are you really thinking about tackling with your product? And then pretty quickly you can start to put that up and compare it to other types of systems. So there is a way of doing it. I think in terms of how AI and quantum add value, that's another question. That can be almost even tangential to the one that you just asked, but is also equivalently important. What is it doing to your system that's actually improving it? And it may not be the number of qubits. Like, there's applications for quantum computing or quantum systems that may accelerate even conventional LLMs, right? We don't really know that application, whether it's going to be useful for better classification, but if those are the angles that actually show that there's better performance and you can do it faster, you can do it with less energy, all right, then it doesn't really matter. Like, the qubit count necessarily isn't the thing that you're focusing on, but it's really that impact to that particular application, and based on whatever algorithm you're using, you know, it applies to. So that would be my answer. It's not an easy question, but that's why it's probably a hard challenge, not only for scientists, engineers, companies to express the power of their approach, but also from the flip side, how does the investment community, how does the government assess any of these platforms? And this has been going on for 2 decades, and I don't imagine that it'll stop at any time soon. So.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to go back to Brett now. Australia has staked a global leadership position in quantum computing. From your vantage point, what do you see as the critical policy and investment decisions Australia needs to make now to stay ahead?
Yeah, just before I get onto that, Thomas, I thought that was a really good explanation. It's extremely difficult to benchmark quantum systems, and you know, there's a number of programs in the world trying to do that, and I think that will continue to evolve as well. So I thought that was a really good answer in terms of we don't even know how that'll get measured in the future, but it's all about the output and the outcomes and the specific use cases that you can apply it to. So yeah, I thought that was good. In terms of Australia, yeah, we've got a fantastic position so far in terms of punching above our weight. You know, that seems to be a common term used around, but it is so true. We have such a strong quantum ecosystem here in Australia in terms of the IP we've developed, the capabilities we've developed, the skilled resources we have in country across the entire quantum stack. It's not just in, you know, making the QPUs. You know, we've got companies out there doing the control systems. We've got experts that can do characterization on these systems. So that skill set's been really built off the back of really strong investment and dedicated investment that was very pointed. And I know Jens was here earlier, and a little bit downbeat about us investing the right way. But I kind of saw it very differently, and I think they did a fantastic job investing in that early stage R&D side. The next phase now is the commercialization, productization, and building the manufacturing capability here in Australia. And so when I think about, and whenever I get an opportunity to talk with government or industry bodies or venture capital or any investors, it's like, how do you support this ecosystem in Australia to ensure we maintain tech sovereignty and that we can become the exporter of the world? We need to now kind of expand the way that we invest into the productization and commercialization. It's not something Australia is naturally kind of structured or built to. We've got quite a small ecosystem, and I believe it was the CTO of Drone Shield that said, even if you won the entire Australian market, it wouldn't be enough for you at 100% market share to become a world leader. You need to go global. So to keep that here in Australia in terms of manufacturing and build that export capability, We need to invest in lots of programs that help commercialize, that help build out manufacturing capability. We've done all the hard work. We've got the IP. We've got all that here. Now we need to keep it on shore. And to do that, we need further investments, good programs around ensuring that we have infrastructure built here in Australia. There's no reason why we cannot be that global leader in quantum computing in supply, not just in research, but in supply. And you see great programs. We've got great like-minded and sometimes not like-minded export opportunities, and people trust Australia in the global market. So we've got a great position, and we just need to kind of double down on that investment. And there's also the need to attract international funds as well. So attracting international funds is not a bad thing, right? The fact that the money doesn't all come from Australia is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing and a very healthy thing. So anything we can do also here to attract more capital equity investment from overseas will only help us to maintain our current position.
Yeah, thank you. Back to Mark. Mark, you've spoken previously about deploying quantum accelerators into real-world environments, from data centers to satellites. What are the biggest barriers to adoption that you've encountered, and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, so the question is about quantum accelerators, but I'd like to just expand that to quantum systems in general. And I think that's why we chose Diamond to develop these systems. Is it's really able to address sensing, computing, even quantum communication systems. But I think the greatest barrier to adoption for across all technology types, not just Diamond, but silicon, is actually the availability of hardware. And true innovation happens when hardware becomes accessible to the innovators of the next generation. And the accessibility of hardware is a combination of factors. One critical factor is that the supply chain within quantum sector is actually not set up to actually produce at a volume that is truly sustainable. And if you really want hardware accessibility to be out there, you really need to be producing, billions of devices per year at that scale. And when you start to get to that kind of affordability, then people, with the previous slide that you showed, Andre, like you can really start to even push your number of qubits down in terms of acceptable applications. People can start to look at different combination of ASIC chips, what we call application-specific quantum computing chips, rather than fault-tolerant quantum computing chips. And I think this is where you will start to do things that is completely not imaginable for what we see today. And so for us, we really focus on what is a pathway to manufacturability, what is a pathway to accessibility, and how can you actually drive that adoption curve so that people have hardware as truly accessible and can make true innovation happen. So affordability, accessibility and manufacturability is the key things that will change the pace of innovation to create innovation much bigger than artificial intelligence sector.
Jonathan, I want to go back to you. We're talking about AI and we're talking about quantum, and maybe they're on different timescales or different levels of maturity. AI offers a short-term return, perhaps, while quantum is a bit of a long-term bet. How do you think about the investability at their intersection?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think clearly if you watch the public market behavior on both AI and quantum, you would sort of think they're both tomorrow's business regardless. I think a little bit to what I talked about earlier, I think the concept of whether it's convergence or singularity or agentic capabilities, et cetera, or improving acceleration and ability, energy efficiency, it feels like that has become, because of some of the factors I mentioned as well, the fundamental issue of our generation, of our lifetime and consequence. So I think what we had 15, 20 years ago was, a kind of couple of cool AI technologies, maybe 10 years ago, that could beat you in chess or Go and all these kind of different games. And now it's the smartest people, the smartest brains are working on it, and they're getting paid like athletes, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars, and it does feel like that's, really the kind of world that we're living in. And I think the urgency has ramped up. Again, I believe AI, it's not a winner-take-all market. I think it sort of will turn out, and quantum can turn out like air, that we can all enjoy it. But unfortunately, the world isn't set up that way, and there's real urgency around it. Whether you look at timelines that we're going to run out of energy, or there might be an event in South Pacific Sea, or whatever it is, there is definitely an idea that, we are moving ever closer to a world where the revenues and kind of the applications have to come quicker. So yeah, no doubt AI is here, whether it's 60 billion or 100 billion of revenue that'll be generated this year from AI. I mean, it's very hard to sort of put a number on it, but it's here. There's 1 in 8 people using ChatGPT. It's kind of a household name. It's coming very quickly. I think I've been here for 10 days. I don't think I've had one conversation that's not about AI and kind of the short-term impact. So clearly everyone's figuring it out and figuring out where the tokens will ultimately be used. I think that's the short-term strategy, but more and more quantum's becoming part of that conversation. 5 years ago when we invested originally in Playground and then into Sci-Quantum, people thought we were kind of crazy, and this thing is 15, 20 years away. And as a result of, I think, the progress we've made across, with brilliant people like are up here and in the room, and AI itself, it's becoming far, far more a reasonable short-term assumption. And that's not to say, again, to my earlier point, that people expect suddenly the world to flick a switch and we're going to have this perfect thing that cures cancer, or we sort of figure out all the lessons of our lifetime. But I think, frankly, even if we're, a percentage of that right, there's, a lot of hope that it's a lot closer. And the world's capital has really changed the alignment. Probably the last point I make, because I focus on private asset investing, is that private markets are going through this enormous boom. Where it used to be, if you think about it, public markets, it's really, really tough to do this stuff in public markets. I know some of you here know Pat Gelsinger pretty well. He's a partner at Playground, who I know well. He really struggled as a public CEO. He's going to be amazing at Playground because he has the ability to, do 5, 10-year plans. And there's more and more capital moving into the private space versus public. It's getting really hard to IPO companies and the demands on that. And that is a really, really good thing for the way people think about AI and think about quantum. It's not that humans are suddenly patient again, because clearly we're kind of getting the opposite of that. Our attention span's going the wrong way with all the dopamine hits that are thrown at us each day. But private market investing, sovereign capital, Australian capital, and to your point, US capital is really, really looking for those solutions. And I think that will continue to grow, which will be really great for the sector broadly, and will allow people to make mistakes and iterate and grow, which previously just wasn't the way Wall Street was set up.
I want to move back to Marcel. Marcel, does Australia risk giving the AI opportunity entirely to foreign innovators and developers? Are we simply going to be used as a foreign-owned and developed big tech, or can we reverse the trend? It's a long question, by the way. How do you see the opportunity for...
You can stop with the question, because I can answer it pretty much straight out the gate. You lit the fuse earlier with your last comment about AI is just a thing and quantum's going to come in and sort of take over. That's how I understood it. I'm not the smartest bloke on the stage. But if I really look at this, the AI world and the journey we are on is actually paving the way for this transition in data. So your traditional legacy data centers and your traditional legacy cloud is transitioning to this accelerated environment. I'd like to think that the journey we are on in the AI space is really paving the way for this transition to happen in a real seamless fashion, and it's really difficult. So real life experience, you've got to think about who we're competing with as a sovereign AI cloud provider. We're competing with organisations that have budgets. Some of them, their budgets are bigger than small countries' GDPs. It is really difficult to compete in that space. And the interesting thing is, it's a very unique opportunity we've got today. So if you think about the traditional cloud, that's got to move to accelerated cloud over a period of time. And I think quantum is uniquely placed to be able to join that journey and that transition piece over the years as it starts to further develop. But I think as an Australian community, we really need to be thinking about that sovereign piece, because as these bigger organisations get larger and larger and control more and more, what's left for us, our children? How are we going to be moving forward as a country if we are not looking after our own IP, our own people? And that's what we're really passionate about. Like we're really keen on working with governments to really establish a framework that they can allow access to the latest and greatest. And we truly believe that, because unless we start to provide that, our innovators are going to look elsewhere and they're going to be attracted. If you look at how the big five work, or let's just use AWS as an example, they'll come and incubate a startup in Australia. They'll provide them thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of credits. They'll bring them into their environment and they're locked in. You know how difficult it is to get them out? Perfect example would be like a Canva. They're in that environment. Australia sees no benefit from our unicorn. And this is where I think we as a nation need to really start thinking about this and thinking about how do we actually protect our own, and how do we actually pave the way for quantum? How are we going to get there? How can we lay those railway tracks on the ground and say, right, this is our journey, this is what we're taking? Because obviously we are leading the world when it comes to quantum computing, but we need to protect that.
Yeah, sure, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Okay, I might go back to you, Brett, for the last one. Building quantum at scale requires patient capital and long-term R&D. What lessons have you drawn about engaging investors for technologies with timelines far beyond traditional venture cycles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to get any kind of company in a deep tech space off the ground takes many different stages of capital and many different types of capital to come in. It is a patient game. And as Jonathan was saying, it's kind of 15-year out, long-term bets, and so you need many different types of capital. In terms of then converting that, it gets different at different stages. So, you know, from my perspective, if you're a company that is looking for raising capital, you've got to look at the best ways to do that. And even patient capital still wants to see progress across the entire organization or the business. So the best way that you can do that is start building credentialization across the different parts of your business. Show that you can build out a product function that can take the technology, convert it through engineering, bring it to product, be very aware of your market and be very knowledgeable of your market. Build your muscles in commercialization, go get some customers, figure out how to get them on board, get yourself another revenue stream. Even if it's small and interim devices is kind of what Tom was saying, which is, you know, there's these solutions and opportunities out there, which is like what we're doing to commercialize and build revenue models there on the quantum machine learning, enhanced machine learning. It's how you can then kind of tie yourself into those, you know, hotter topics like AI. And so it's really not one kind of silver bullet or one way to say, this is how you kind of go about securing patient capital and the challenges with that. I think it's more about, it's a holistic approach, and that's how the patient capital investors look at a company and they look at the capabilities, and you really need to build that. And it's just lots of hard work. We've spent a lot of time at Silicon Quantum Computing purposely not getting frothy, and whether we have purposely been stealth or not, we have been stealth. We've just been so busy building out all that credentialization and capability that we haven't really got involved in all the hype. And so I think keeping it real is probably the way that I'll say is the best way to maintain strong relationships with patient capital, is to keep it real and keep it factual.
And that was Josh Brown from Blue Glass hosting that final panel there. So Steph, congratulations on a fascinating and very well-attended event this year. Will you do it again next year?
Today's the wrong day to ask me that. Absolutely. The momentum is really growing. We were very, very lucky that last year we helped catalyse over $100 million investment into the presenting companies on stage. We really hope to see that momentum continue. So yes, we are really looking forward to seeing the event return.
Well, thank you for watching Semiconductor Australia 2025. You can catch up again with all of those panel discussions online, the series link, Semiconductor Australia 2025.